Going tuition free will not help America become a better country. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if this is your first time. So, conversations about America switching over to a system of tuition-free higher education have been heating up recently, especially within the past two political election cycles. Many people are quick to point out, or many people will tell you that America switching to a system of tuition-free higher education is this universal good that is as morally and ethically correct as can be. Many of these people are quick to point to to various European countries about their success with tuition-free and higher education. What they do not acknowledge is these countries or these systems of tuition-free higher education are not without their deep flaws. Also, many of these systems are drastically different than what you will find here in the United States, and that goes far beyond or that goes beyond students not paying in tuition. Believe it or not, as it stands, the United States is one of the most educated countries in the world, yet we pay one of the highest rates of tuition in the world as well. And also many or also numerous countries that are also amongst the most educated also pay tuition in colleges, such as or countries like this would include Canada, South Korea, and England, to name a few. While Canada and South Korea pay tuition for college and university, they don't pay quite as much as we do here in America. In Canada, they pay about $6,000 per student on tuition, and in South Korea, they pay an average of about $4,000 per tuition or per student on tuition. England, on the other hand, actually pays a little bit more than what we pay here in the United States. On average, tuition fees in England cost about £9,000, which equates to about $13,000. Last semester, I wrote a semester-long essay, or I did a semester-long project. Excuse me. About on tuition-free higher education, and what I found is it's not anywhere near as simple, easy, and ethical and prosperous as you might think. And if you listen to politicians such as Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Many European countries follow a rigorous process to ensure sure high or high quality higher education standards while keeping costs low. This process is called the Bologna Process. What this process is it's a series of meetings held by delegates from the countries that follow the process, and it, and these meetings are to ensure that the countries are keeping a high standard of higher education. It is a rigorous process, and if we if we wanted to introduce it here in the United States, we would have to introduce some serious changes to our current system of higher education. Like we'd have to completely change, or in some cases, we'd have to completely change our universities in order to make this prosperous in the long run. And it's not just at or going tuition free and keeping prosperity is not just just uh, just canceling student debt, or it's not just canceling tuition fees. No, it's a very complicated process, and you in some cases you might have to completely change the way you, that all or some of your universities are set up and run. In some of these European countries, some of their colleges that hold in-person classes don't even have a true campus. I mean to just instead take a look at Germany, for example. Recently, Germany has switched over to a tuition-free higher education, and instead of tuition, they pay an administrative fee now. But the way that their colleges and universities are run are completely different from the way that colleges and universities are run here in the United States. In Germany, you you take a career test so that before you enroll in college, and well, and that test will give you options of your or to choose from for your degree program, or we'll give you degree program options to choose from. Once you selected your degree program, it is very hard for you to change out of your program. Like it's not necessarily impossible, but it's incredibly difficult. Like you're set on a path to, to complete your degree program in about 3 4 years or so, and it's delib and they deliberately make it extremely difficult for you to change programs. And this is done so you're not sitting there, or so you're not staying in college and wasting taxpayer euros. This system is considerably different from what we have here in America, because here in America, changing your degree program is about as simple as scheduling an appointment with your academic advisor or with the academic advisor of the program that you choose to choose to change into or transition to. I would know. I've changed degree programs multiple times. Some other countries that have had tuition-free higher education for a considerable amount of time and have had to make drastic changes to their system in order to make it prosperous. An example that I'd like to point to is Poland. Poland has a lot of f- private research search universities. So a couple of decades ago, Poland wanted to make all universities public and all of them tuition free. Well, well, it didn't work out so well for the private research universities. Over time, the professor pensions just kept building and building and building and building, and they eventually got to the point where the government could not handle the overhead costs. So they had to reprivatize portions of their higher education system, and um, and now many of the private research universities, or many of the research universities that were once private, or that were private before going public, are private once again, and you have to pay tuition to go to those universities because they're not public and they're not tuition free. Earlier in this video, I mentioned England, and I mentioned how England has, or how England pays more per student on average for tuition than America does. Well, did you know that at one point in time, just a couple decades ago, England was tuition free? They they tried a tuition free system that would keep the free as many freedoms to the college student as possible, and like a kind of like what we want here in the United States. Well, it was not very long before they had to start introducing some more legislation and to help keep costs to a minimum. Most notably, they had to introduce enrollment caps. Now, what I mean by enrollment caps is they had to cap off how many students could enroll in each university in order to keep the costs affordable and keep the universities tuition free. Well, it turns out that severely restricting the amount of students that are able to enroll in a university because of government mandates is extremely inefficient, and there is no prosperity in it. Like for that essay that say that or for that project that I wrote, one of the one of the sources that I read it actually cited that there was a severe lack of prosperity and he because with it England's system of tuition-free higher education. So here in here in the United States, we actually have a system of tuition-free, or we actually have a system of higher education that's similar in terms of structure to that of England, in that both countries have universities with their own campuses, with their own dorms, with their own facilities. Here in the United States, we do have more on-campus facilities on average than England does. Mostly because or mostly because college sports over in Europe are not anywhere near as prominent as they are here in the United States. But anyways, they they found that there was no prosperity. I mean, so many. I mean, when you hear these politicians and these advocates talk, they talk this big game about how going tuition free will is this morally correct thing. And well, my question for you is a lack of prosperity morally correct to you? Because it's not to me. Like, it's not fair that it's not fair to the rest of that the rest of the country has to spend all this money on these people, and we're getting we're getting next to nothing compared to what we're spending, or compared to our ambitions. In my mind, that's just not morally correct at all. And after 20 years of tuition-free higher education, it's pretty clear that England feels this way as well, or that England felt this way as well. Now, advocates for tuition-free higher education over here in the United States will say things such as eat the rich. They've got they've got so much money, they have more than enough money to pay for it for this social program as many other as well as a couple others. Well, at what point has this worked? At what point has taxing the rich more actually worked? Time and time again, the rich have just exploited loophole after loophole, and they just keep storing their money offshore. And well, if we just raise their taxes again, it would be foolish to think that they're not going to do the same thing again. History has a tendency to repeat itself. Why why should we think that it's not, or why should we think that history is not going to repeat itself here? Why should we think that just because we're taxing the rich more just to get these social programs that will do this immense good for the United States? Why do we think that it's going to work this time? There is at no point in history, well, at least not recently, has this worked for us. At least worked all that well. So, taxing the rich, I cannot say that I support this. I cannot say that I support this concept, or at least the practice of it, because it just hasn't worked. It simply hasn't worked. On the other hand, though, we absolutely need to look at how to keep costs of tuition down here in the United States. $11,000 for tuition is insane. Like it's ridiculous. Now, now, not, now, that being said that there are other options for prosperity, and college is not right for everyone. But that's it. But those are other topics for another time. I do have a question for my American viewers. For those of us who are in college or who have been to college, do you like having all these freedoms? Do you like having your own facilities is for education and your own rec centers, your own campuses? I did, and do you like it like prosperity, or do you like the country having large amounts of prosperity? Well, you can't have the freedom. Well, you can you can't have the low costs, and you can't have the prosperity all at once. It over time in history, over time, it's just proven that you can't have all three. You just can't. Again, we absolutely need to look into how we can cut down on tuition costs. But going tuition free would be a drastic overreaction. I mean, and perhaps we should look again at countries as such as Canada or South Korea to to look into how we can maximize prosperity, keep our freedoms, and as college students, and as well as keeping the costs of college just in some in a range should that will be manageable for the majority of citizens. That's going to do it for today's video. If you liked it, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, share the video, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye.